Hey everyone, welcome to the Messaging Matters show. My name is Todd Jones. I'm the host and always happy. This is one of my funnest things to do every month. I get somebody smart like Lily on the line and let them talk to us about what they're expert in. And it's just fascinating to me. And sometimes they go on for an hour. So we'll try not to go on for an hour today, but let me introduce my guest to you. But before I do that, let me do a couple housekeeping things. If you are someone who watches this show regularly, either live or on the replay, I will be opening a new channel in probably January for the Messaging Matters show. So these will start being streamed over there. Also, we'll move the videos to that channel, and it will be called Messaging Matters Show. I understand that YouTube is happy that you have a channel for your show. I used to think that you could only do a channel per email address, but that's not the case anymore. I can apparently have at least more than one channel with this existing email address. So I'm really happy about that. But we will be moving that to the new channel by January, if not next month. So just to let you know that if you're somebody who watches the show, but these videos will stay here. So if you link to this video, it won't go away. So just a little bit of a housekeeping note before we get going. And I see my friend Devinder is in the chat room. So, hey, Devinder. Devinder is one of my good friends for a very long time. So I thought maybe some of Lily's friends would be here because they were really interested in the social media about this. But let me introduce my guest. Her name is Lily Ugbaja. Did I say that correctly? Close?
Yeah, close enough.
She's got a lot of grace toward me. And she is the content expert at marketingcyborg.com. And she has got a lot of experience actually writing for some well-known product companies. And we will talk about that shortly. But Lily, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much, Todd. I'm so happy to be here.
I was watching a little bit of your presentation you did earlier this year, and very clear, very easy to understand, and some very good content there. Tell us a little bit about some of the organizations, some of the companies you have written for. They're who's who in the SaaS space.
Yeah, I didn't actually start out writing for the who is who, but I'm lucky to have written for brands like HubSpot and Zapier and Hotjar and Databox, and the list can go on.
Yeah.
Yeah,
You just
just been
actually
really
showed
fortunate.
you're on Twitter this morning. You put out about an article you wrote for Zapier, and so I hadn't had a chance to dive into it because I'm pretty sure it's long. But I thought that was really cool, and it came out the day that you're coming on the Messaging Matters show. I thought, oh, what a great just social proof for what you have done. So anyway, back in July. I'm see if I can do this actually. I've created an overlay. Back in July, you made a tweet, which I was like, oh, yeah, this is really great. I love what you said. And I'm going to see if I can put that overlay up there. It's probably not the best, but you said, Brant, I think we should all slow down content. We should stop using the excuse of shorter attention spans to create fast-paced, boring content. I'll share my full thoughts on this someday. But long and short, let's write human to human, use full context, even if they already know. And I replied to you about that. As you can see, there's 114 likes, 7 quote tweets, and 15 regular tweets about for this particular tweet. And I invited you to come on the show to talk about it, and you graciously accepted. So can you tell me a little bit about what you were thinking about when you tweeted that? And did you follow up with, actually putting your thought to paper or something like that? Or is this it?
Well, I still have plans to do like especially now that I've started the newsletter. I have plans to expand on that, but I never really got to doing it. What I had in mind when I tweeted that was So I've seen a lot of tweets on Twitter where
Yeah,
very direct and let stuff be short.
yeah,
But sometimes
you were kind of coming in and out there.
uh, I was saying I do not have a problem with clarity, but sometimes we tend to sacrifice the full context behind the content that we're putting out there in favor of being crisp and short and to the point. And I think
Right.
that the justification behind this is that people say that people with shorter attention spans, whereas you find that people can sit for hours and watch movies.
Mm-hmm.
People can pick up a book and not put it down until they are done with it. And so the problem isn't shorter attention spans. The problem is that we are not putting in enough work to retain the reader's attention. So you're direct the issue where it should be. It's not about shortening the copy. It's about connecting with readers.
Now, when you're talking about copy, you're talking about long form content. You're talking about
Uh-huh.
content on blogs, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Do you apply that? And I actually have a thought on this, but to like just landing pages or website copy pages as well? Do you think it's the same thing there? I see. I was actually doing a project recently, and I would look at the competitors of the person that I was doing the content for, the website copy, and their pages would be just incredibly short. They might throw some images or something like that, but the actual content just didn't say anything. And I was just like, there's just not much depth there from either an SEO standpoint or even a marketing standpoint.
Yeah, so I think that it's even more important in copywriting to take time and really connect with the audience
Mhm.
instead of being just direct and these are the benefits for signing up for our products and these are our features. I think in copy, especially, we should take the time to slow down and connect with the audience.
Yeah, I think
And
that that's a problem. People don't connect with the audience, and it's more. I like the. I think a lot of content is overly informational. It's like let's throw as much information as we can. Maybe cut out some of the content because people don't read, right? Let's cut out some of the context. We don't need that sentence, but and instead of actually um, connecting with the audience, and that brings up another point that I have thought about is: are you delivering information only, or are you trying to get your audience to do something?
yeah, exactly. Like, when we put out content that is just, completely direct and just saying this and do this and do that, it feels like we're just instructing
Mm-hmm.
instead of like taking the audience through a transformational experience. I'm going to use actually concerning copy. I'm going to use my website as an example. When most people come to me for my freelance services, one of the things that they really talk about is my website, and my website is the most long
Mm-hmm.
and the most lengthy copy I've seen for a copywriter. But I feel like what I did that makes those people, that gives them the opportunity to see the transformation that they can um, experience for themselves, is that I paint the problem. I let them visualize the solution, what it can be. Instead of just
Mm-hmm.
saying, I write blog posts and they rank, and here's an example of a blog post that I've written.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's little things that may seem irrelevant, like my background as a blogger.
Mm-hmm.
Being able to tie in those things kind of gives the work more depth, a personality. Uh, Let me give an example with like content. I think short and direct content is like going to say your ophthalmologist and he or she tells you, okay, your vision isn't very good and you need a pair of glasses to see better, versus slowed down content where your ophthalmologist says, I saw you feel for the chair when you wanted to sit. And I'm pretty sure those headaches you describe, that they signal your vision isn't very good. And so you need a pair of glasses, because I don't want you falling over the stairs and I don't want you knocking over your favorite verse. There's a connection that comes in this second slowed down context. It takes longer to deliver the message, but then the listener can actually feel the transformation. They actually recognize the problem in themselves. Like if you don't give that full context, they may be like, come on, it's just a headache. I just probably need aspirin or something.
Mm-hmm. As someone who had headaches because my vision was changing in college, I totally relate to that little story you just told. And you're sounds like you're doing the classic PAS, problem agitate solution, which is a very classic copywriting formula that can be used in blog writing as well.
Yeah.
There's a couple things I want to add to that, or to talk about in regards to that. The second one I'll do after this, but there a time where getting to the point is really a better solution? I'm thinking about food blogs, right? Thanksgiving's come up in America in a couple days. Happy Thanksgiving, everybody. So maybe somebody starts searching for a cranberry salad recipe. So they start looking, oh, there's a cranberry salad recipe at this great blog. And they go to the blog and they're looking for the recipe. And what they get is like 800 words about grandma used to make this cranberry salad and we loved it and blah, blah, blah. It's like, I just want the recipe. Thank you. I think there's a time and place where being direct is a good thing. And I think what you're referring to is a business, not a lifestyle blog, but a business who is trying to nurture people down the funnel. Would you agree with that?
So I have a couple of thoughts about this. This food blogs, for example, they're like on the far end of the spectrum, and then there's business blogs on the far end of the spectrum. And I feel like
Mhm.
um each one might not be doing like a very good job. You want to come up and state, when someone lands on a page, they want to know that they're on the right page. And
Mhm.
so they need to immediately relate to whatever it is that you're saying. And
Mhm.
they may not relate to your grandma's story. There's a way to weave in the story without making the story the focal point of the attention of the article, where people are reading through and they're using the story without even noticing that there's a story. It's just the story makes it more relatable to them. And so you're not, and I think this ties in really well to what we're going to talk about concerning the LEMA framework, logic. This is the place where, logic means you cut off the things that are not meant to be in there instead of just rambling.
Right. Yeah, I would tell the recipe blogger to go ahead and put that recipe at the beginning, and then do your story, and then repeat it at the end. And I call it, if you're not careful, you will. I think the word is from journalism. You will bury the lead. You
Yeah.
need to put. This is something I've been thinking more and more about lately, largely after interviewing Maddie Osman last week, who's the author of this book, Writing for Humans and Robots. She talked about leading with your lead, LEDE, the important information, like a journalist does, because I'm used to writing these hook worthy introductions, which I do like doing. But I'm rethinking it a little bit. Maybe I should at least put a summary sentence before I do the hook worthy introduction. So it's just something I've come back to think about. But whether you're writing a recipe blog or you're writing a blog for Zapier or your company, you should not bury that lead. That's the phrase that Maddie uses in her book. So you have that summary so that people will know that they are in the right place before you get into the content and you start using the story and that kind of thing. I mean, that's kind of what I've been thinking about.
Yeah, I think a way to check, let's call it a litmus test to check
Yeah.
if what you're saying, the story that you're telling, is actually useful is if this story wasn't about you, would the audience be able to see themselves in it? Because
Yeah.
no one cares that your grandma made the best roast turkey. If they can't actually see themselves, what does it have to do with me?
Yeah.
And I think that's when you put on the lens of the audience, you can be able to filter your stories in such a way that you're actually giving stories that they can relate to and connect to, and you're not losing them. And I also agree with, putting the when I was at Animals, we had this concept called bluff. I know it's a journalism thing also, where you want to state the bottom line up front.
Mhm.
To me, it doesn't necessarily mean summarizing the article up front. I think I will call it stating a thesis up front. I don't know if I'm saying that right. Stating like a thesis up front,
The
like
thesis up front. Yeah.
yeah, like the
Yeah.
argument you're
Yeah.
trying to make.
Yeah. That's probably well in a blog content article. I think that's probably a better way of looking at it for sure. I'm thinking about it in terms of about pages because I'm always rethinking
Yeah,
how I do write about pages. I am the about page guy after all.
guy.
If you know me on Twitter, um, but yeah, that so you don't want to bury the lead and your thesis, your summary, whatever um, that logic is that you talk about in their framework, which we'll get to in just a minute. I want to bring up one more thing before we get into your LEMA framework. That's LEMA, right? LEMA.
Yeah.
Because you're slowing down and because you're doing some of the things you're talking about at the beginning of the interview, um, that's going to mean taking some time to get to know the audience and learning research, if you will, learning about what those pain
100%.
points are actually. You can't just
100%.
dive into writing an article without knowing that. Is that would you say that's correct?
That is like 100% correct. So at the top of every draft that I create, I have three questions. What do they know? What do they want to know? What do they need to know? And you cannot answer these questions if you do not know the audience really well.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that these questions also make sure that you're leading with at least what they want to know or what they need to
Mm-hmm.
know instead of what they already know. Like, say you're writing an article about the pandemic. You don't lead with a pandemic broke out into 2020 because like was it 2020, 2019? Because like everyone knows that.
Common knowledge. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. Do you have, I think you can, there's an element of research to that, right? I mean, because I've read a number of different people talk about our friend Adrienne Barnes. She does the persona. She does personas, and she uses the jobs to be done framework to do that. And I think that's a good way for overall. And then you to go to Grow and Convert. The guys from Grow and Convert talks about they call it SEO pain points. But in order to
Yeah.
do that, you actually have to dig in. In some cases, you actually have to, the guys from Grow and Convert talk about interviewing people, about listening on a sales calls and other customer service things to get those pain points. Is that some of the things you think about when you talk about learning what the audience needs to know?
That is the foundation of my strategy. When I do strategy, I want to know exactly who the audience of that very brand is, not who the perceived persona is. And so I'm looking in the CRM and I'm listening on the sales calls and listening in on customer success interactions and stuff like that. But as a writer, I don't think you need to go through all of that. Like
Mm.
you could easily learn as much as possible from a simple Google search about uh, an audience. If the company you're working with is doing their content strategy and briefing right, there is a target audience at the top of the brief. And so you fake
Should be.
the target audience. If the company doesn't set a target audience for you, it's always smart to ask
Yeah.
who is the target audience for this piece because they need to be the homing beacon for whatever you write. And if you're able to get the target audience, you can easily plug that into Google and filter for forums or communities specific to that audience and just like
Right.
read the banter that they share with each other. I get to know who they are, if they are senior level audience in that industry, what would a senior level person know? You'll be able to find out those things by looking through the chats in forums. Now
What
for
about
B2B,
something like
okay, go on.
SparkToro? Have you ever used
Yeah,
SparkToro?
I signed up for Spectre recently, but I haven't really gone into. I only ran one search on it, and I think it's like really, really because it's so easy to find the influencers and in certain industries and sponsors.
Yeah, I have a free account too, and I haven't really dived into it, but that's partly what they, you know, uh, promote that they do is audience research. So I'm curious about that, if that would be helpful to not just a writer like you, but the company that you're writing for. Certainly, you brought up the idea of a brief, and absolutely, if you're a writer, you would hope to get a detailed brief from. If you're writing for Zapier or HubSpot, you're likely going to get one of those. If you're a writer for maybe a smaller product, maybe they don't have a brief, maybe they don't have their audience defined. Those would be areas that a writer could help those companies, I think, do. Wouldn't you say?
Yeah. So before I started writing for the bigger brands, all the brands that I wrote for, most of them would not actually have like a brief, or they will have like, okay, we want to target this keyword or we want to target this topic, and they just give that to you. And so
Yeah.
I created a brief template where these are the things I need to work with, and I send
Mhm.
it to them. And I'm like, please, can you fill these things for me? And that's something that people can do to get more detailed information. And your clients will appreciate you for it too, because they know now that you're not just taking in terms of the words on the page, but like you're really, trying to understand the strategy and the business and everything and how it all comes together to drive revenue.
Yeah, I think that's a gap in the maybe knowledge base for some companies. I mean, I always tell people, it's like, look, you don't know how to do a brief or whatever. Kaylee Moore's got templates for briefs. You can
Yeah.
buy them from her and literally follow the instructions. She does a lot of things like that. But certainly copywriters, a lot of content marketers, they have briefs they work with. I think there's maybe it's a knowledge gap, might be the right way of putting it. I don't know. A lot of smaller companies, you're right. I mean, they're like, hey, I want to target this keyword, I want to target this subject, and maybe those are things that they don't understand as much, maybe don't make the connection. So that's an area where I think a lot of freelance writers can increase their value to the
Mhm.
company, because I mean, audience research is huge, right? I
Yeah.
mean, I mentioned Adrian earlier. She does personas a little differently. I used to hate personas, but now she's making me like them again. But she's got a product on Gumroad. You can basically learn, and it's not very much money, and you can learn the process as a freelance writer, right? And increase your skill set. Or if you're a company and you need to understand a little bit more, you can buy that off of Gumroad. But there's so many resources out there, and I'm really kind of interested in the companies that maybe fall short of some of this stuff. So that's where being a quality content writer can really play in and help a company out.
Yeah.
So let's go to your framework. I think LEMA, LEMA, and that stands for logical, explicit, memorable, and actionable. So I'm curious to learn more about this framework.
So, I think that when people want to scale production, if you're working with lots of freelance writers, especially junior writers, you need some sort of process, some sort
Mhm.
of what is it, checklist, that they can consult and
Right.
know that they're moving in the right direction. And for me, the Lima framework is that um, all encompassing ringer that I put my content through. And like you said, it stands for logical, and explicit, and memorable, and actionable. So this first one, logical. You know what's more frustrating than a piece of content that isn't that's just fluff. What
Hmm.
I find the most frustrating is a piece of content that doesn't actually follow logic. It just starts in the middle and it moves somewhere else. And like there's lots of interesting tidbits of stuff in there. But because it follows a structure that you can't actually follow, it becomes confusing. I've worked with a ton of freelancers and subcontracting kind of relationship in the past. And that was the biggest issue I would say. It's not that they do not know how to do the research. It's not that they do not know how to write beautiful words. It's that they do not follow logic. And when you don't follow logic, you lose your reader as fast as you know. The other thing I believe that logic does is that logic restricts your scope. And this is like really, really important. In my SEMrush thread takeover, I gave the example of tomatoes and how you could write 4,000 words about tomatoes. And it's true. If
Hmm.
you do not follow the logic of the audience who's going to be reading the article that you've written, which somehow ties back to knowing who your audience is. So if you cannot follow the logic of the audience, you end up writing things that are interesting, but they don't really want to know.
Yeah. So logic is like being relevant to the audience.
Yeah, it's like asking the answering the why, the how, the who, the what, the where, in the right order, and for the right audience knowledge level.
Gotcha. That
That
made
makes
that
sense.
totally make. Yeah. The who, what, where, and how. Those are, and that's again that goes back to journalism, right? That's we answer those questions as a journalist. So you're you're asking people, and I don't think they should. But I think that's a skill set from journalism that passes over into content marketing that's worthwhile. So I find a lot of journalists do a really good job with content marketing. I think that's one of the reasons right there.
Yeah, I didn't realize you were a journalist, and that's pretty cool.
Not trained per se.
Yeah,
I did some writing for a local publication in our state about startups and all that, but I'm not really trained as a journalist. That's kind of funny. I have done uh, some journalism as an untrained, like didn't go to college for it, but I found myself doing some journalism, sports journalism at one time, and then startups and technology, that kind of thing. And I have a good friend named Bobby Warren who used to be a journalist, and he does content marketing now. So I think, and I have a site locally in town called Conway Scene. It's a lifestyle news site, and we are able to get some students. We have three colleges here. One has a PR, public relations and communications department, and I have been able to work with some students in those department. Well, one of them especially was trained as a journalist. She's a very good storyteller, so that is a very good skill set to have. And you don't have to be like you don't have to go to college to pick up journalism skills, right? So anyway, just think like a journalist a little bit.
yeah, I believe so too. And I think journalists are also really good at knowing where to stop because I think this was one of the things I really struggled with when I first started out perfectionism and wanting to get it to the 100%, which is also something that people need to remember when they're trying to scale content is that your 100% is not actually that different from a 90% to the person who's reading it.
Mm.
You get, and
Yeah,
I
that
know
makes sense.
that because journalists are always very deadline oriented, so they know when to stop and just ship.
Well, one thing you don't understand, maybe in content marketing in the journalism world, is so fast
Yeah,
pace, and so they can knock out multiple articles in a day because they have to with a time crunch. Whereas in content marketing, in general, you can get some time to think about it, time to review it, time to edit it, whatever. but journalism don't always have that luxury. They've got to get, especially like if there's, I did sports journalism for a while, had to write an article about the game that happened that night and get it up before I went to bed. That's you have to figure out how you're going to do it, so it's kind of interesting. It was always interesting to
Yeah.
me to watch the game, and then like I write my article, and then I would like look at 4 or 5 other people to see how they viewed the game as well. We all did something different. It was always kind of fun. But anyway,
That sounds pretty cool.
looking at the same event, everybody's got a different way of doing it. So
Yeah, and I think that's like another thing because somehow journalists have the what I say frameworks to make content be memorable, even though you're writing on a time crunch because of the stories and the stuff that you put in there. It becomes relatable to the audience and it becomes something that they can remember. And that's like a really, really good skill.
yeah, and yeah, if they can remember it later, that's good. Sports journalists in America from the 20s and 30s was a different animal, even up through the 60s probably. It was more storytelling. If you look back at and this, I'm thinking my data set is college football, but they came up with names for some of these players. You don't always get that today. For instance, I mean, I read a book about Red Grange, was a great running back at the University of Illinois back in the 20s. Grantland Rice is his name. He was a great rider back in the day. He said he was like a galloping ghost running through the. Next thing you know, that was his name. Everybody called him the galloping ghost. That's the kind of thing you got in sports journalism in that time era. You don't get that so much today because you got the internet and everybody saw the game and you have the AP write up and maybe they throw some stats in. Not as much storytelling really in sports journalism. I missed that too. So anyway, we gotten sidetracked and that's my fault. The next one is explicit, which I think you said in the notes is clarity. Can you talk a little bit
Yeah.
about that?
Yeah. So part of thing is if I say something, does the other person understand it in the way that I have said it?
Yeah.
And I think that comes down to being really specific with whatever it is that you're saying. For example, I say you should create content that is easy to read. Now, easy to read could mean so many different things. Easy to read could be short. Easy to read could be big fonts.
Yeah.
But when you say exactly what you want to say, so in the example I used for the essay thread, what I said was you need to create content that that uses words that people do not Google as they read. And so the person who's reading this clearly knows that what we're talking about is using simple words when you write, and that's explicit and that's clear, and it doesn't leave your reader guessing.
Right. A lot of people talk about writing for an 8th or 9th grade education level. Maybe that's an American thing. I don't know, but that's a similar thing. We use words you don't have to Google. If you can read on an 8th grade level education, you can understand what we're saying. And I think a lot of companies will throw a lot of flowery language in their marketing materials. And my favorite example of this is, I don't know if you know who Weird Al is, but he's a musician in America. And he does a song called Mission or Mission Statement or whatever. The video is animated, but it is very much about this, and I don't have it in front of me. So now I would have a hard time. But if you go back and listen to that song, you'll know exactly what he's saying. He's using all these core competencies and missions, blah blah blah, very flowery language. It's like, what does that even mean? And I think that's partly what you're talking about, being more specific Like my English comp professor in college would say, "Now, Todd, I think you need to be a little more specific." So, yeah, always been one of my issues.
Yeah. I think one of the ways to really get to, because it's one other thing that I find like struggle with a lot. It's one thing to have a thought in your head, and another to be able to convey it in the way that it is in your head in such a
Mhm.
way that the other person reading it knows. And so, what I do is, if I'm editing content, for example, what I do is I say, "What are you trying to say here?
Mhm.
What does this mean to you?" And we probe that and probe that and probe that until we've gotten to a point where even a 5-year-old can understand what it is, that like until there's no more question, there's no more what are you trying to say here
Mhm.
to answer.
Is that an internal thing you do with your team,
Yeah.
or like, I know that with website copy and that kind of thing, you can always use something like Winter, where they have WYNTER Pep Laha's group, where and actually I've done this. I've gotten paid a little bit. You look at like the value proposition headline or whatever, and you tell them if you understand what they're talking about or not. It's a really good thing. But how would like a writer or even a regular uh, product company execute something like that to know that, hey, what I'm writing, is there a filter you write it through? Do you like get some people to look it over and go, tell you if they don't understand what you're talking about?
For me, I think I've worked long enough with an editor to be able to spot when my content is beginning to sound um what's the word? I don't know what the word is. I think for new writers, if you can afford to work with an editor for a while, do it. If you can't, and you can afford to pay an editor to like edit you, do it. I think the final check is when you're reading through the content, if you can afford to leave it, allow it rest for a few days and you come back to it.
Mm-hmm.
That's the best hack. I believe me, you're going to
Yeah.
spot places because you've forgotten all about this stuff. And then you're reading it now with fresh eyes and like,
Yeah.
what am I trying to say here? What are we trying to say here?
Yeah. In her book, Maddie recommends, I think, 5 read-throughs. And each time you'll see something different that you didn't see, and I think that's a good thing. I do like having other people look it over if it's possible, um, to because they see things you don't see, whatever, if that's possible. If you're a smaller company and you're using freelance writers and you don't have an editor in place, um, there are some ways you can do that by to have another set of eyes. Actually, if you go to Copy Hacker, something they've done recently, I've noticed probably in the last few years, and they probably did this before, but they definitely do it now. At the top, you'll see like the author is Lily Ugbaja, peer review Todd Jones,
Yeah.
editor Joanna Weeb. So you'll have like 3 names up there to let the reader know that it's been filtered through 3 set of eyes. And so that's really, of course, not everybody's copy hackers, but I guess coming up with some sort of way to do it. I really think editing, so many people I know have said that editing has really improved their writing, but so many companies don't take that into consideration. They just get the writers, and the writers write, and there's a lot of things. Again, I said knowledge gap. I think that's a way. That's something a freelance writer could bring to the table. It's like, hey, we really need to have an editor. Um, anyway, so
Yeah. Well, I think that would be like a very tough conversation to have because I've had the privilege of working with awesome editors, but I've also worked with editors who are like, there's a difference between editing and copy editing. And
mm-hmm.
if you're unfortunate to work with a copy editor who you think is an editor, you don't actually improve. The words just get flowery, but the essence of the article doesn't improve. So
Yeah, can
it
you?
can be a tough.
What
No,
would be
go
the
on,
difference
go on.
between a copy editor and a regular editor?
And an editor is someone who looks at your article from, first of all, the content strategy aspect of it. How does this meet the goal of this article? How does this tie into bring in business revenue, whatever? Does this address the audience? Does this address search intent? Does this address, the reason why it was created for both the company and expert? Is this laid out logically where we don't miss stuff and where we're not rambling? That's developmental editor. And then it's also the next phase is talking about clarity, and is this clear, and is this memorable, and is this actionable? Because you can write the best content in the world, but if readers are not having actionable takeaways that they can implement, because when people implement the stuff that you've shared, that's when they remember you. That's when they bookmark your article to come back to it. That's when they share it. That's when they want to think about when they think about a topic, you're the first person who comes to mind because they've taken what you've said and they've gotten results from it. And that's what an editor does. An editor holds you accountable to the structure and to the goals and to the goals and to, sorry. I'm sorry. So
That's fine. You got a visitor there.
To the goals and structure and clarity and actionability. Whereas a copy editor is trying to make sure that, a copy editor sometimes checks to make sure that your links are right and that you're linking to reputable sites, and they're like the final eyes that looks through the content to make sure that you're using grammatically correct sentences and that the flow is, the transitions and everything is just there. They fix the upper layer of the content, whereas an editor fixes the foundation of the content.
That's it, and I think in a lot of situations, especially maybe smaller companies, that particular role is probably put together, like combined, because it's kind of hard to, you're talking about splitting those roles, and you have to have money to pay both of them. So maybe the smaller company's got somebody who handles both of it. There definitely needs to be a proofreading element, obviously, to make sure the links are correct, grammatically correct, and the editor part of it you're talking about is something I think a lot of companies maybe miss. So that would be, I think it's great if you can do that. Memorable. How can we make content more memorable?
When you shared about the sport journalism stuff you did back in the day, if I were to remember this podcast, it would probably be the first thing that I remember. And from there, I'll be able to relate to other points that we made on the podcast because I remember that, because that is something that is relatable to me. And it's something that I can easily visualize. And that's what memorability is about. You want to stand out. You want the content that you're putting out there to be something that when a reader sees in future, like when a reader is Googling and they see a couple of brand names, you want yours to be the first they click, even if it's on position number 5. And the only way to do that is to create content that is memorable, that they can associate with a feeling, a visualization. And that's something we achieve through using examples and stories.
Yeah, I think so. I think this is kind of an extreme example, but one way to be memorable is to create something that no one else will dare to try to copy. Your content is so strong, so exhaustive, so big, so memorable that, hey, I would give it a shot, but that's just, we don't have the time, we don't have the resources or whatever. Because there's so much copycatting in our world, I mean, skyscraper content, right? Let's take what was there and do it now. That is like a copycat situation, and that's what they were trying to do originally with skyscraper content, is to do more than. But when you start talking about companies putting out books, stuff like that, you're getting into a different world.
And
so. Well, you've kind of frozen up on me. I don't know if you can hear that or not. Can you hear me? Okay, you're unfroze now.
Can hear you.
Kind of frozen up. Oh. I think she's going to try to rejoin us. Nothing like technical difficulties. So the next part of her framework is actionable, and we'll have her on again here shortly. But in her notes, she says step-by-step showing tools, takeaways. I would think like in terms of call to actions, getting the person reading to take a step. There are a lot of ways you can do that. One of which, of course, is get people to sign up for an email newsletter, or to do a download, or book a call, those types of things. Are you there?
I am.
Okay.
I'm just going to leave my video off.
That's fine. That's fine. I kind of moved on to actionable. She is had some tech issues today, and I think a visitor, one of our little children, is staying home, so that's been kind of a challenge for her. But certainly, the LEMA framework is, I think, a very good framework, and something I think that is an easy thing to remember. It's memorable in that regard. That's why I like frameworks. I have my own. I call it the REO framework. But the LEMA framework, logical, explicit, memorable, and actionable. So that last N is to be more actionable. Have a checklist, give them that checklist. But I am a fan of checklists, and so I asked her some questions in the notes. How can we improve our content quality as a solo or small team? And she said, I think content quality comes down to the brief. Your goal as a content manager is to make sure that your brief includes action items that lean into the LEMA framework. Logic, for example, is to create or approve outlines, and you should. This is where you set a logical structure for the piece. Call out, clearly explain, including example. Hey.
I'm sorry.
You're fine. I was just trying to answer some of the questions you had in the document, and but we wanted to kind of finish with the actionable.
Okay. I'm
how
actually on the phone, and I don't know how this works.
I can see you fine.
Yeah.
Can you elaborate on Actionable a little bit before we wrap this up?
Sorry, what did you say?
Can you elaborate on being actionable as we wrap this up?
Okay. So the most important thing you want to do in your content is drive people to take action, because the reason why people sign up, or the reason why people read your articles, is because they want to do something. They want to learn something and implement what they've learned to achieve a goal. And so
Mm-hmm.
you really want to include takeaways in the content that you've done. So if you're sharing let's say an article about 5 um email templates that people can use
Mm-hmm.
to warm up their list or something. In that article, as you write, you're going to include examples so that people can visualize what it is that they need to do. And you're going to include explicit step-by-step instructions
Mm.
on how they actually need to do that. I don't know if that
Are
makes
you,
sense. So that includes
no, it does. And
screenshots
are
of you
yeah,
going through the process so that they can follow along and achieve what it is that they are trying to achieve with by reading your article.
yeah. And so you're a fan of downloads, giveaways.
So it works with
Okay, you there?
yeah. So I was just saying I'm not a big fan of downloads, because I prefer people to give up their emails freely, because I'm a copywriter, for example, or a content writer, and I know how many email lists I've signed up to just because I
Mm-hmm.
wanted a content asset, and then I
Mm-hmm.
never read their emails.
Right. Yeah, I think
Yeah.
that's we've got a tipping point with the emails right now, and a lot of people have adopted the whole, you know, sign up for me, my email without worrying about an asset. So it's certainly um, it's something that I think people are trying to decide what they want to do with. And on that note, marketingcyborg.com is her new website, and you can sign up for her email list and get
Yeah.
mad scramblings of marketing sciences, dissecting strategy, content, and analytics shared 1 to 2 times a month. So if you want more of what Lily brought to us today, then go ahead and go to marketingcyborg.com and sign up for her email newsletter, which I actually need to do. And then I can get rid of some of the other emails that I have and focus on yours. So, and you're going to do about once or twice a month. Is that right?
I'm sorry, you're breaking up for me. I'm
You're going to do emails about once or twice a month.
yeah. So I haven't actually sent the first issue. It's gonna be released this Thursday, and it's about the LEMA framework.
Nice.
And after that, it's gonna be once or twice a month.
Yeah. Yeah. Very good. Well, thank you for coming on. I know it was a little challenging, but I think we got through it. And if you want to know more about the LEMA framework, sign up for her email newsletter. That's coming out Thursday, which is Thanksgiving Day in the States, but that'll give us an opportunity to read something that's not Black Friday related. And so actually, I'm going to do that when we get done here. And but anyway, thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you so much, and apologies for all the ruckus.
Live shows are always interesting. So I know you had to have your buddy with you today. He wasn't willing to go away, so Kids want what they want, right?
Yeah.
All right. Thanks, Lily.
All right. Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Well, I know it was challenging, but I think it still went pretty well. You had some very, very, very good content and thoughts. So I appreciate it very much.